Disclaimer: the views expressed on this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek are solely the opinions of the host and the guest. The content of the conversation is not reflective of the institutions or establishments mentioned therein. Take all these opinions with a pinch of salt and a dash of lime if needed. Namaskara. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching or listening, and welcome to this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek. The guest this week was Amanda Siew. Amanda and I had this conversation over a 14-hour time difference because she's currently in her home country of Malaysia. Nonetheless, we were able to have a great conversation, mainly surrounding the topic of journalism, because she's aspiring to be working in that field. And we spoke about the multiple facets associated with news media and journalism, like the differences between national media and local media, and some of the nuances associated with the field that you probably don't necessarily think about while viewing it with a zoomed out lens. We also opened the conversation with quite an interesting topic, which I'm not going to spill the tea on over here because I think you guys should listen to it to find out what it actually was. Before I continue to blabber on, I present to you Amanda Siew on this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek. Hey Amanda, how's it going?
Hey, Prateek. It's going well. It's 4 a.m. Where I'm at, so I'm a bit buzzed, but I'm okay.
This is 4 a.m. in Malaysia, for those of you who don't know. And so, yeah, before we start off, let the people know who you are, what you like, what you don't like, what you do, what your aspirations are, and so on.
Well, hi everyone who is listening in. My name is Amanda Siew. I'm a professional media senior at UCO, International, my brain died, University of Central Oklahoma. Professional media is basically like a journalism / video production major, and I'm leaning towards more of the journalism side. And fun fact, I am currently back in Malaysia, so I'm doing all my studying, working all remotely with this 14-hour time difference. So it's been fun. What else did you need me to say?
Anything, things that you like, things that you don't like, things in general, things that you don't like and like in general, some of your future aspirations, yeah, that kind of stuff.
Well, things I like. Well, if you somewhat know who I am, you would know that I have an obsession with boba. So that's number one on the list.
Yeah.
Well, I like the news, surprisingly. It's something that I really got into in the past, maybe 1-2 years, and it's come to become like a really big passion of mine, surprisingly. Didn't picture myself being here, but here we are. What else do I like? I, for some reason, like to watch crime documentaries lately. It's been an interesting thing I've been going into, and I fall asleep to them, which is also kind of creepy.
Hey, as long as you're sleeping.
Yeah, as long as I'm sleeping, nobody calls the cops. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess we'll go into dislikes. I guess I hate fake people. So to put it out there, just based on some experiences I've gone through in the past decade, I'll say. I don't like people who are being fake. You know, if you want to have like a real, genuine relationship with me, you got to be, real and genuine with me. What else? I hate slow internet. Studying remotely and everything, slow internet is like my worst enemy, especially when you see the person on screen on your Teams meeting or whatever, they freeze and you're just like, oh, I'm gonna punch something.
Right. Yeah.
Dislikes. I don't know. I think I'll just leave it as that.
Okay. What are some of your future aspirations? I mean, it's okay if you don't know what it is, but what is something that you'd still see yourself doing down the road, even if you're doing or pursuing a different career or whatever that is?
Well, I'm currently doing my internship at a local TV station in Oklahoma, and so I'm hoping to kind of get into a news producer or digital media producer at some point down the road. Kind of no idea where that's going to go just because of the whole COVID situation and, legals and stuff. So
Right.
that's the hope.
Cool. 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 Um, yeah, like I found the crime show thing interesting. Like, what is it about the crime show that you like watching, or like, is there something specific that you seek out of it?
Well, I think it kind of started with my mom. So my mom is actually pursuing her master's in counseling at the moment, and she has this really she likes to watch like ghost movies that I realized. She likes to watch like crime movies and kind of analyze it from a psychological
Mm.
perspective. And so I kind of picked up on that,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of watch it on Netflix for like the drama, and then just kind of seeing how twisted up some people's minds can go. Like we all live in who we are right now in the present, and we all think that we're fine and everything, and then like you kind of watch like this perspective on someone else, and to think of how their brain is like so different from us, and how certain experiences they go through can lead to such a drastic outcome. It just kind of a little bit mind-blowing, and it also scares the crap out of me because I'm like, oh, people like this are out in the world where I
Right.
live. uh
Yeah. 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 What show are you watching right now? Just out of curiosity.
So I've gone through quite a lot on Netflix, but the one I'm watching right now is called I Am a Killer.
Mm.
Um, that sounds very harsh.
Yeah.
I'm not a killer. But basically, there are 2 seasons of the show, and they interview inmates who are on death row.
Mm.
And they talk to them about what happened and kind of their point of view. But they also talk to people outside, so like the victims' families or people that know that person. And so you kind of get this almost full picture situation of what the thing is like. And sometimes it's kind of cool because you see how manipulative some of these inmates can come off, or
Mm.
how some of these inmates were just put at situations that just weren't in their favor at the time. So
Mm.
it's just quite interesting. It's very dramatic, obviously, but it's kind of cool. You kind of see, in a weird way, you see this human perspective of like a murderer. It wasn't very savory to say that, but it's kind
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
that's just where my brain goes.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because even with like the classes that I have to take, I mean, I'm currently taking one that sort of analyzes the behavior patterns of criminals and serial killers and stuff, and so like there's some grim stuff that you tend to see, and yeah, but like it's very interesting to sort of see the psychology behind it. Because I mean,
Mhm.
psychology is a part of life for us. Like, if you look at it, like we all think differently. There's certain things that motivate the way we do things and so on. So I think like it's a big motivator in the way that they behave and do certain things.
Mhm.
Um, I almost said like, yeah, they do things like necrophilia, but for those of you who don't know what necrophilia is, yeah, I probably shouldn't say it. Never mind. Should
You
I?
guys can go Google that yourself. It is of your free will. We're not gonna force you to
Uh,
do anything.
yeah, please don't Google. Like, okay, don't Google it. It's because I don't want people to see weird. But basic, I cussed there. I'll have to bleep that out.
We can
Oh
just
no.
cut this out, I guess.
Yeah. No, I mean it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But yeah, I think I'd prefer for you to not go to Google and search it. It's basically just uh, criminals or people performing sexual activities on deceased bodies, to put it in a politically correct manner, I guess. But yeah, going back to what we were talking about, it's very grim stuff that you see, and a lot of the psychology behind it is very interesting. So yeah, I was just curious to know from that point of view, like what got you into it, because it can be harrowing to watch. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also kind of my way to get in more kind of grasp with the world, because when you're working in news, you do come across situations like this. Like you hear about shootings, and sometimes you have to deal with these kind of things in person, and that can be really harsh on yourself if you're not ready for that kind of thing. So in some ways, kind of watching these kind of documentaries and series, like it kind of low-key prepares me for it. So it's kind of bad, but it also desensitizes me to stuff like this.
Mm.
And so like I remember there was once I think I was in a newsroom back then, and we had like a shooting come through. Like that was a shooting that was reported like a bit off in Oklahoma City or something. And then um, because I've watched so much of this kind of stuff, I'm just kind of like, oh, it's a shooting, without realizing that, oh, I'm supposed to be reacting differently from this. So
Yeah.
in a way it's good because I get desensitized to stuff like this, so I can work with what I have, but it's also bad because it kind of shows that I don't really have emotions.
No, I think you do, but it's just like we all do. But it's just that, and I think that's general to anything, right? Like if you get used to something, even if it's bad, you sort of like your body just switches off, I guess, in that sense. Like in terms of the emotion that you feel, you don't really give into it too much. You're like, oh well, just another one, I guess, and you sort of move on.
Yeah.
Um, but it has its pros and cons. Let's put it that way. Like getting desensitized by this is yeah, it has its
Quite a
pros
red
and cons.
flag.
Yeah. I don't think it's a red flag necessarily, but oh well, you know. But speaking of the news, you said like watching this stuff sort of helps you desensitize yourself or like prepare yourself to see dark stuff out in the field. What was it that got you into the news, like, or wanting to study journalism and sort of looking at that as a career? Was that something that happened early on in school, or was that something that popped up recently? What's that like?
So funny enough, I stumbled across journalism on accident.
Okay.
I kind of found my passion for news on accident. And so what happened was, so I transferred to the US from Malaysia,
Mm,
and I was originally a mass communication, like general kind of like no particular field major in that sense. And I was kind of like looking at video production because I was like, I really enjoyed editing videos and creating my own content. Like that's something I'm really passionate about. And so I was looking through all the different universities. I was like, okay, UCO seems pretty good. Living expenses are pretty okay. Fees are pretty okay. So let's go there. And so the closest thing they had to kind of video production was professional media. And I, at first, had no care for journalism at all. I was kind of like, I'm gonna go into this, I'm gonna get my degree, and then go out and be some video production person, whether I work freelance or whatever. That was the goal. Like,
mm,
literally, this was like 2 years ago. And then I went into this class. It was my first kind of video news class. It was called Video News 1. And the professor was kind of like, hey, you have this like knack for writing. You kind of like, he's just pointing all these different things out. And I was like, maybe, but I don't really feel interested. It's fine. And then she kind of was like, you know what? Why don't you join this producing class the next semester? I'm teaching it. I think it's a good chance for you to get some experience, and I think you'll be good at it. And I was like, I don't even know what producing is, but I have credits to take. I need to take extra classes, so let's go for it. And then that class was pretty much what solidified my passion for it because, yeah, it was after taking that class, and I was like, oh, actually, you know what? I kind of want to do this now. And then I completely abandoned the whole idea of being like a video production freelance person, and I was like straight into news. So that was kind of the my origin story, I guess, what some people would say.
interesting. Were you someone as a child that liked watching the news?
I don't think so. I was that kind of person that stayed up for morning cartoons, not really news. But I my earliest memories of news would probably be kind of like it's 12 a.m. We have this show that goes on at night. It's called Nightline,
Mm,
on like a local channel, and it was English news, so I could understand it. And so I remember stumbling into the living room when I was a child, sleepy and stuff, and I see my dad there, and I'll go sit next to him and listen to the news and all that. At the time, none of it makes sense, but I think one thing I remember until now is the sound of that guy's voice, and the guy, the anchor, he's still anchoring on that same show today. So that's kind of where I started my first exposure to news, but
mm,
it wasn't really a big conscious decision because I was just kind of absorbing content, not really
mm,
processing or anything. So
mm, mm,
really, I only really started getting into news and what it stands for and its principles, all that, when I came to America. So
mm. So even during your time in high school, it wasn't necessarily like a passing thought that you had, or did you like often keep up with the news? Were you someone that like, or no?
no. So when I was in high school, I think I kept a lot in my own role. At the
Mm,
time, it was kind of like focus on your studies and get through college, that kind of thing. And
right.
I wasn't someone that was very informed about current events or politics. If I knew anything, it was off social media or,
Mm,
word of mouth with friends, that kind of thing, talking. So I wasn't a very informed person, wasn't very involved in the community at the time. So I just didn't really have a care for it.
Mm.
And in fact, when I was in high school, I believe I was debating between taking computer science and mass communication. So news wasn't
Oh.
even in the future,
Right, right, right. Why didn't you take computer science?
I like coding. That's a
Okay.
weird fact about me. I don't think
Okay.
a lot of people kind of can tell from this, but I used to love coding. I started
Mm.
it back in high school and did some projects on my own at the side. But then once I got into college and things kicked off, I kind of stopped there. But that
Mm.
was the main reason why I went in. But I didn't want to do ad maths, so I was like,
Mm.
okay, we'll go mass comm then.
Okay. Okay. But yeah, that's something I don't think I knew about the coding thing. So I was just curious now since you mentioned coding, like I don't know much about coding, but like was it
Mhm.
something that you learned through school or was it something that you did on your free time?
So for any computer nerds watching out there, I'm not really good. I only do HTML, which is kind of like the basics,
Yeah.
But I started that when I was in high school because I took what did I take? Yeah, I took computer science. Not computer science. It was called information something technology, but it was computer related.
Mm.
And that was an exam that I took for my IGCSEs. And one of the portions of the exam was that you had to code like a simple web page based on some instructions they gave you. And for some reason, that was the best part I would excel at. Like
Mm.
people will be excelling at like creating Word documents or PowerPoints, and I'm like, I like coding.
Mm.
And so it started off from there. And then after high school, when I graduated, I had a 6-month gap year before I went into college in Malaysia. So I kind of coded a few things on my own time, procrastinated, let it all die, um, and then got back into college in Malaysia. And then I took another computer class. And I remember that was kind of when I had my big first project. Because the professor wanted us to code something like a web page with multiple pages. That was just the main baseline. But then I was kind of like, you know what? I'm gonna go all out for this. I'm gonna be
Mm.
that, you know, type A high achieving agent in the class. And I just kind of did this. I remember, I think I still have it in my computer, but I think I did this at least 10 page, like it was like a home page and you have 10 pages inside. It was this web page about BTS, the Korean band. And
Okay.
I remember the best part of it was the basically I had a tab
Mm.
where it was just about their music, and
Mm.
I would I would embed Spotify playlists of their songs into it, and that was like the highlight of my coding experience. But since then, I haven't really gotten back into it.
Mm. Interesting. Interesting. Cool. We're gonna bounce back into the news side of things because that's what you're currently doing. When you said
Mhm.
coding, it just sort of took me in a different direction. But hey, cool. That's cool because again, that was something that you did, and that's part of you in a way. So, like for those of you who didn't know, now you know. Amanda used to code before, and she used to embed BTS songs in there. So there you go. But
The highlight of my career.
right. But anyway, going back to the news, I think you said it's been 2 years since you've been like part of like studying journalism. What is it that you like about journalism? Like, if you can give me like your top three in terms of the things that you like about studying journalism.
Um, well, this will come off kind of weird, but I like it for the stress.
Okay, please do
I
explain.
know, most people, well, most people don't really want to work in a stress-induced environment. They want to
Mm,
have a job that's kind of stable. You kind of know what you're doing. It's predictable, that sort of thing. But the thing with news is that everything happens so quickly, and anything can change at a split second. Because news changes as life goes forward. So for some reason, I've learned to really enjoy and love how stressful you can get when planning a show or writing something or
mm,
keeping up with breaking news. Like that, like weirdly enough, it gives me a lot of energy to do what I do, especially with handling this time zone. Like, there'll be some days where I'm kind of like hoping, like, I hope something bad happens today. It sounds so bad for me to say that,
yeah, yeah.
but it's kind of like, for like I remember there was the first time I really got into news, like properly producing content for news, was one weekend I had basically become the subordinate to one of my friends who was running the social media accounts for our school kind of like news organization, News Central News.
Mm.
And that was my first weekend doing it alone because the person, my friend, had to go off on a weekend trip. There was no internet, that sort of thing. And so she gave it up to me. And so this was my first time really doing anything news related, because in the past I have worked on social media before, but it was more like clubs and societies, kind of posting promotional information, that sort of thing. And so when I did that for the weekend, I believe we had breaking news that whole weekend about a shooting that was happening. I cannot for the life of me remember where it was,
Okay.
but I remember it was somewhere near Oklahoma or something.
Mm.
And so that was the big breaking news that was happening, and I was keeping up with that like for 3 days straight. And so it was from there my professor was kind of like, hey, you're kind of good at this. And I was like, I guess so. And so from there I kind of took more leadership in running the social media channels. I got into news producing, and that was pretty much my origin story, part 2.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you said you like the stress. Would you say it's just stress that comes with it, or is it the speed that you like that comes with it?
Uh Definitely I think maybe it's a mix of both, because I'm working as a producer right now with Youth Center News, and I'm interning at a news station in Oklahoma City. And so a lot of the work that you do, especially when you're producing a show, you're creating the show as it goes, as the day goes by. You're working on really hard and tight deadlines. You're constantly doing 50 things at once. It's kind of like a non-stop thing until the show is done. And so I've grown to really like that chaos in the newsroom and really like that stress. Like it feels like hell when you're doing it.
Mm.
There will be times where I'll go cry for a second and I'm just kind
Yeah.
of like all in my head. But the satisfaction
Yeah.
that comes with finishing that show and seeing it live on air and everything goes super well, that's like such a weird euphoric feeling that I get every time I produce. And so a lot of people tell me, they're like, I don't understand how you do this, you look so stressed out, how are you handling everything? I'm kind of like, I don't know, but I've really grown to really enjoy the process of that.
Interesting. Interesting. So what are two other things that you like about journalism? You mentioned the stress sort of aspect associated with it. What is something else, or what are
Right,
the
I
two
went
other
off a
things that?
tangent.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I like the fact that you sort of attached that with the story because I think it
um,
helps give more perspective. Yeah.
well, I think it's a lot to do with my kind of who I used to be before news. So as I mentioned before, back in high school, I wasn't really informed about the world. I was kind of in my own head, study, study, study. That was all I cared about. And I think since coming into news, you get to learn so much more about the world. And just, I start to see the importance of why news is there. It's to keep people around you, the people that you love, safe and informed of about what's going on. And, you might think that it's not really a big deal, but, imagine if a tornado would have hit Oklahoma. The news is there to inform you about that tornado and to make sure that you're safe. And so kind of like the purpose of news is kind of what I really like, because like I said, I used to be really uninformed, and then you think about how that could impact you. Like imagine if you're going to go vote and you don't know who you're voting for, and there is no news source or information that you can get. You're going to go into that voting booth and maybe vote off eeny, meeny, miny, mo, but you're not going to make the best choice for yourself. And so that's kind of where I got that news is really important, and I want to keep my friends and my family and the people around me informed about what's happening. And so that's kind of the second thing. Third thing, I guess it's kind of, news is a great way for me to bring all my interests together in some weird sense. And so I'm that kind of puzzle person. If I'm bored, I will go and do online puzzles on my phone just because I can. And also, like I mentioned, I used to really want to go into video production back before I got into news. And so I can bring over this video production aspect and the creativeness of that into news as well, because there'll be times where I have to go out and make and produce a story. I have to go interview people, and so you get this human interaction that I really like. And then I also get to work with the camera, edit things, and create content that is new and fresh for our audience. And so it's kind of just a great way to bring everything together and just all what I love together. And that's pretty much where I'm at right now.
Mm. So it kind of hits that sweet spot in terms of your interests, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
which is why you sort of, okay, cool. That's cool. I like it. Like, and yeah, sometimes we tend to hone in on just one thing, but the fact that there's like multiple things being satisfied by the news or like being or getting into journalism, I think that's sort of nice in a good way. I mean, yeah, being nice is
Yeah,
good. I don't know why nice. Anyway, whatever.
you're fine.
Yeah, nice is good. I don't know why nice in a good way ended up becoming a sentence, but anyway,
Okay, put that on a shirt.
yeah, nice is good. New branding. Maybe when we have some merch out, who knows when. But anyway, what are some of the pros and cons of journalism, you think, or studying journalism at the moment? I feel like you mentioned some of the pros, but like, is there anything else that you'd add to the pros? And if there's any cons to that, what would that be?
So the question is, what are the pros and cons of kind of my experience studying journalism?
Yeah, and journalism in
Um,
general, according to you, from your perspective.
okay. Well, I would say a big pro is kind of really learning about the place you're working at. And
Mm,
so for me, because I'm studying in the US, I learn a lot about the US. And so through journalism, you kind of see how different events, historic events in the past have kind of shaped the America that we have today. And so, in a sense, because I really like studying history as well for some reason,
mm,
so that also brings that really nice aspect of everything I like in one place. So really, the history and kind of understanding why the world is the way it is now is something that I really like about journalism. Um, and then I guess let me think. I haven't thought about this before. This is a good question.
thank you.
um, Well, I think it's also being able to interact with the community. I think that's a really important part for me with journalism because
Mm,
you're reaching out to people who not necessarily would have a voice on a daily basis. They're not going to have the ability to stand at the podium or speak on national TV about stuff. And so with the stories that I have done in the past, I have interviewed a lot of international students, UCO students, that kind of thing. And so being able to get your voice heard on important matters is such a crucial part of news and a crucial part for anyone who's trying to, being a person, because obviously we all just want to be heard at some point. And so just being able to give that voice to people who don't have it, I find that really empowering for that person and then for myself as I go through with what I do. So I think that would be another great thing. Um, and then also I think just from working with News Central News, you've really kind of grown to have like a big family of people who are all in this huge stress ball every single day together. And so those kind of human connections that you can relate to and talk with, and like we all work together, but I know that if COVID weren't around, we would all be eating dinner together at some point. So
mm.
the family and the people you meet in news is such a great part of it as well. At least for me, so far I've had really great colleagues and all that. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and then I guess I'll move into the cons. I feel like there are more pros, but I can't think for the life of me right now.
No, that's
Sleep
okay.
deprived. So.
That's okay. That's okay.
Well, I would say a big con is kind of dealing with people sometimes because, obviously with the past, I think 4 or 5 years or so, we've had this rhetoric that's been, very strong that, the journalism is against you, we're the enemy of the people, we're fake, we're
Mm,
doing this for money, da 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 da.
mm,
And, when you work in local journalism and you study journalism and you know what it is, especially to you, it kind of hurts kind of seeing these
mm,
kind of comments from people. Like sometimes you might go out, and I've heard people, especially anchors, tell me like, they'll be out reporting or something, and then someone will come up behind and like, you're fake, and you get yelled at with all these different things. And so
mm,
the negativity sometimes that journalists get to face on a daily basis is such, it's very hurtful and very toxic, but it's kind of sad that it's part of the job now.
mm,
I'm thankful in the sense that I haven't had to come face to face with this, in person, but I've seen the comments on Twitter and Facebook. I can hope that I don't come across stuff like this, but I know that I will at some point. And so
mm,
that's, I think, the biggest con for me with journalism is just that. And then maybe the amount of work you do in journalism. For a story, you have to go out and research a story, interview people, and you only have a small amount of time to do that story. But I think coming back to the point about the satisfaction of everything complete, I think that cancels the workload out for me.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. You said something interesting there in the con, which I've thought about myself too quite a bit, and I've mentioned this in an earlier episode, which at the time of recording was probably the episode that came out last week with
Mhm,
Hazik. This episode is being recorded on the 28th of January. But yeah, I mentioned there that I don't watch the news, and
mhm.
for those of you who haven't watched that episode, it's mainly because for me, I felt like it was putting me in a negative spot. So I felt like staying away from it gave me some sense of peace. So for you, I'll go there first. I have a couple more questions, but I'll go to this one first. Have you felt that sense of, like you said, there is a lot of negativity that comes from it? Um, well, I guess you could branch it off multiple ways. Firstly, how do you deal with the negativity that you see so often through Twitter, through news media in general, and why do you think there is that negativity?
Wow. Um, so I actually have a lot of friends who have told me that they don't watch the news because there's so much negative energy and everything. And, to an extent, I can agree with that because, you do work with quite a lot of negative things. Unfortunately, something that, most people in journalism know about it is this phrase. It's called, if it bleeds, it leads. If,
Mm,
there's a shooting or something, that's probably the lead story. And so it's kind of sad in that sense that,
yeah.
you know, and you do go in and experience a lot of negativity, especially now. There's COVID, there's this pandemic that's going on, there are local things happening, there are things on a federal level that aren't super great as well. And so it is what it is. But for people in news, at least in my opinion, and why I do the things I do, even though the things are negative, I feel like these stories are also important to tell you. Like,
Mm,
some people are kind of like, oh, I don't want to hear about the COVID numbers. They're so bad and high. It's making me feel sad. Da, 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 da. But I'm kind of like, we kind of need to know about these numbers because is the pandemic getting better or not? It's going to show whether it's going to be safe again or not. And so, yeah, the information will come off really negative, obviously, but sometimes it's just something that we need to know. In terms of dealing with the negativity, well, it's gonna sound bad, but I've kind of desensitized myself to it. I've kind of put myself away from the news, and so
mm,
in my brain, I'm kind of like, I'm working today on social media or I'm producing the show. It's negative as crazy, but I'm in my producer brain right now. This isn't about how I feel. It's about serving the people who are watching the show, and that's the most important part, making sure that they know what's happening in the community around them. And besides that, kind of separating myself, I also, we take breaks. Obviously, when you're working a lot, you stressed out, take breaks. I think especially if you're working in news, it's important for you to have maybe a couple of hours away from social media or a couple of hours away from your desk and just kind of, chill, watch some Netflix for a bit, hang out with friends, human connection, that sort of things, to kind of refresh you and let you be able to work again the next time you need to go in. So I think this would be my top two things. And what was the other question?
yeah, like just how you deal with it. How do you cope with the negativity? And you said you desensitized yourself
Uh,
to it. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah.
Mm,
I will put it out there that it's not healthy. I don't think it's healthy at all. I think I came to a point, I think maybe sometime last year, where I was in a lot in my head about like, oh, am I kind of being a weird human being? Is this kind of bad for me psychologically? Like,
mm,
is it normal? Like, why am I feeling so mundane towards situations that make people upset? Like, I don't think this is a good thing. But
mm.
I've learned to kind of separate myself from that. And there'll be times where I'll break down and cry, and there'll be times where I'll work through things like normal. And so it's just about finding the right place and the right time to feel certain things, at least for me. Yeah.
Mm.
I don't think everyone else does the same thing, but this is just what works for me.
Yeah, and again, it's your perspective, and this is a perspective platoon. Hey,
Hey!
but yeah, like yeah, I think we all have our own ways of dealing with it, and you said it is unhealthy, but what do you do to sort of cope? Like, what is your stress reliever? Like, is there a certain type of show you watch on Netflix, or is it a certain type of music that you listen to? Um, what are those stress busters for you?
Well, I would say music is quite a big one. I listen to a lot of Spotify if I'm not on a Discord call with a friend or something, or I'm not doing anything. I'm always on Spotify. I'm listening to one of the how many damn playlists I have. I have way too many for one person. But music is just a great way for me to kind of, you know, get out of that negative zone, because I listen to a lot of K-pop. I think if you are friends with me or know me for a bit, you know that I am quite into this. And so even though I don't understand what they're saying necessarily, sometimes the music, the vibes that they give, it's very uplifting and positive depending on what kind of songs you listen to. And so music has been a really great way for me to kind of de-stress, especially sometimes if I feel angry, I feel upset, I can listen to like rock metal and like jam it out for a couple hours and then I'll be okay. So yeah, I would say music is a really big one for me. And then obviously Netflix, just watching documentaries. I might not necessarily go into crime if I feel a bit more negative and stressed out about stuff, but I might go into stuff like competitive makeup shows. There's this show I watch called Glow Up. There's a lot of things you can watch on Netflix, and so I just find something that's a bit more away from actual reality, and just to go there.
Right. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we all have to find a way to cope, right? Because I mean, like you said, it's maybe not the healthiest thing, but at times it's a progression. Like you learn and you adapt and you try to make things better. So
Yeah, and I think there's not a one size fit all situation when it comes to coping with negative emotions or stress. So it's important you find what you, but not something that is detrimental to your health, like alcohol, drugs. You don't go into that kind of thing. Find healthier coping mechanisms. I think that's really important for everyone to figure out what that is, because we are in a stressful time. This pandemic is not getting anywhere, and so
yeah. I think this question, I guess it's something that I've thought about a lot. And one of the reasons that it's probably like a motivating reason for me to like start something like this, and that is that I feel like the news is very polarized, like you said. Like there's a lot of negativity associated with it, and like unfortunately there's like you flip one channel and there's one narrative being said, and you flip another channel and there's another narrative being pushed. So from my personal understanding, I do believe that journalism in its core is about seeking truth, right? It's about seeking what is actually happening rather than peddling a narrative. So from your perspective, based off of what you know, why do you think we're in this position right now in terms of being in a spot where there's two different narratives being sprayed about the same thing?
Well, I feel like this happens more on the national level of news. So like if you're watching the bigger channels, I think that's where you see it a lot in terms of, what I've worked on so far, and, seeing local content. I think local newsrooms, at least in Oklahoma, I know are quite neutral when it comes to stuff like this. Even though sometimes, you have associations with a specific name that's on a national level, I've come to know that they're actually quite neutral with their reporting. And so on the local level, I think you don't see that as often. But I think it might have been, I don't know. Do you want me to bring politics into this?
I mean, you can if you want to, but go. It's fine. Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead if you feel
Okay,
like
I
if
will
you
do
feel like
my
that'll
best to
justify your
address
answer.
this.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've seen a lot of this more obviously in the past 4 years since before the change in presidency last month. Wait, what month is it? Sorry, earlier this month.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because of certain people's affiliations and want to support certain things. And then I think sometimes people just forget about what journalism really is, because maybe if you work on a national level, you kind of think about the ratings, you think about the money, you think about you don't really think back to what is the core of journalism, and that is to inform people around you who don't know as much as you do, and give them a voice. And a big part of journalism, we told from day one, is stay unbiased with your reporting. Even though it's something that you might be reporting on a story that upsets you or gets you excited, but you need to make sure that it's cut clean facts and information that is for the people. And so I think maybe on the national level they just kind of forget that. Yeah, but I don't know. I think it's just really people's affiliations, maybe certain people on talking on certain shows who have an affiliation, unless it is labeled as sort of a opinion talk show segment. I think people outside of that, like anchors, reporters, shouldn't be pushing that narrative through it. So I think it's just a lot to do with the last administration pushing their narrative of what they think news is, and people kind of following that and eating that up. So I think leadership really has to do a lot with the narratives that people have nowadays with what news is to them and whatnot. So hopefully things get a little better with the new administration, hopefully. But here we are.
Here we are. I personally
I don't know if that answered your question at all.
It did because like you said, yeah, I think it reached. I don't know if we're in the peak. I hopefully hope that was the peak and that it'll get better now, like you said, and we go back to that neutral zone of being unbiased. But it's going to take time because I think these news channels, especially on the national level, and I think it's not just America for that matter. I think if I'm not mistaken, it happens around the world in different parts of the world. Like they're controlled by certain political parties, or like they have some sort of pull, which makes them go a certain direction. They get funding. And yeah, it goes back to the green after all. It goes back to the money, unfortunately. But for me, I personally feel like it's been something that's been boiling underneath the surface, and the previous administration just sort of brought that to light a little more. Because I'm sure, like, I mean, we haven't been keeping up with American news until after we came here, of course, like after you moved here and after I moved here. But I've heard people talk about stories about how back in like the 2008 to 2016 sort of phase, also you could see different channels spewing different narrative, and how it was like sort of dividing people rather than bringing people together. So it's unfortunate because I do believe that in its core, like you said, journalism is about seeking truth and being unbiased. But unfortunately, we've reached a point where it's also about making money. And I get it, like we all need money to eat, but is this the healthiest way of doing that? Who knows? Probably not, but
Yeah, but I mean, by right, journalism, you're not supposed to. I think I remember one of the big classes I had when I was in UCO was kind of like, talking about ethical practices in a newsroom. And so, if you are working on a campaign, political campaign, you can't bring that information, you can't really bring that side of you into the newsroom. Like you need to be like, okay, I'm Amanda the journalist, not Amanda the campaign manager. You need to kind of separate yourself from that. And by right, political parties aren't allowed to kind of own a TV station, that sort of thing. That's a practice that's happened. I know Malaysia has those, but by right in the US, that's not supposed to happen. Like my brain is tired. A local station you're not even supposed to, announce your affiliation. Like that's personal to yourself, who you are and who I've worked with people who have different views in politics from me, but that doesn't stop us from working together, because as long as you leave that political hat outside the door, that's fine, and you don't push that in your work. And so that's something that at least in New Central News we're very mindful of, and we're always like kind of watching to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand. But obviously on the national level, I don't have enough information to say, but I really think it's something that hopefully will get better as time goes by.
Yeah. And I just for clarity's sake, we are again sharing our opinions. I need to add like a disclaimer on every episode from now on, because just to play it safe, because I don't want people sort of thinking that, oh, her saying this or him saying this is a mirror image of what the entire entity thinks, because you never know. You don't know what people under that entity think. Like you said, you work with people who have different affiliations and different beliefs. So that doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're saying something that the entire entity, the entire organization for that matter, thinks the same way. So Yeah, this is just our opinions, just to make that clear. But yeah, just to make that clear.
Don't sue us.
Yeah, don't sue us, please. We don't have the money to go to court. But
That is a sad, unfortunate reality.
yeah, it is. It is. What do you think needs to change for us to go back to that place of journalism being more about truth seeking rather than narrative peddling?
Oof, that is a loaded question.
It is, yeah.
And
I just
that's a
want
really
your
good question. I think
perspective.
it's very
Yeah,
thought-provoking, at least
yeah,
on my end.
yeah.
Yeah. I think it's gonna take a lot of time. It has to do a lot with people's mentalities. Obviously everyone has opinions, but it's how far you bring these opinions and how far you can kind of say like, I have opinions, but it's not such a bad thing if people have differing opinions. I think that's a really big part. Like, when I see people who have different affiliations with me, I don't think of it as, oh, he's gonna screw up my stories, da 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 da. It's he can bring something else to the table. He brings a more diverse opinion, and diversity is what we really need, nowadays. And in the newsroom, that's something that we really focus on. And so I think it will take time for people to kind of get to know, because some people are kind of in the more traditional mindset of like, this, and I feel like things nowadays with the age of social media and the evolving generation, we're trying to shift that narrative a little bit, like, hey, news isn't just one way or another. You can find stuff from other places, and there are things that can be different, but we can also unify over the same thing. And so I think it will take a lot of time for people's mindsets to change, and that will kind of be on them as well, because there's only so much you can do to educate and inform people. You can't just talk at them for 6 hours and hope they'll understand. They have to come to that self-realization on their own, and I think that's a really important part. But I think maybe one thing that could push that maybe is, again, leadership. Not to always point back to administration, but they are the people up there, and you would listen to the president of the United States, not listen to like a random college student talk about stuff. And so if the administration would have pushed a particular narrative, that will obviously reflect in the community. And so if the administration would kind of be like, hey, the news is for this and this, maybe people would kind of listen like, oh, maybe we can shift things a little bit. But I think it has to do a lot with influence and just your own self-actualization about things like this. And I am going off on a tangent. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I think in those tangents is where some of the answers are. So that's totally fine. And I appreciate you trying to go in deeper. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking earlier, like when you mentioned something about how there's shows on certain or on all news channels where there's their opinion shows, and not like giving you the news. It's a question that I don't think I've thought about before, but when we were talking about it, it just popped up into my head. Why is opinion on a news channel?
Well, I think, I guess it kind of started off with newspapers having an op-ed section where like the editor can kind of write in their own kind of like, unbiased, in their own self. And I honestly don't know too much about history behind it or what it really does, but I think it just gives the editor a different voice, to voice out an opinion, that's a bit different. So
Yeah.
I think it started off as a not harmful, like a harmless little extra content, extra perspective to a story. But I think, I don't think it's the worst thing, because again, if people look at it and they're like, yeah, he has a different thing from me, but maybe we can, get through our differences and discuss things. I think it's really all to be creating bigger discussion, because if we were all the same, like the same people, like copy paste, we're not going to go anywhere, and nothing's going to be interesting. There will be no ideas. And I think the best ideas come from when two people have differences and they discuss and they find a compromise. Like that's so I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just the way people have to interpret it. And I completely forgot your question. What was it?
No, it was just about why is there opinion shows on the news channel or on news while the news is about like giving you the truth. Why is opinion on there? It was my question. But yeah, it's just something that I was curious about. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't really know too much about the the reasoning behind it. Maybe in programming, it's just another way to get content. I think a lot of opinion shows happen at night, at least from what I know, when there's a less viewership, so you're not really saying it to a big audience, not like significantly. So I guess maybe it's just extra content during the night, because I know like when I was in quarantine back in Malaysia, I watched CNN for 14 days straight, and every time I turn on the TV, it would be nighttime over there, and you would have I think Don Lemon. I can't remember his name.
Don Lemon.
But yeah, him. And so you kind of realize after watching, it's like, oh, he's not a normal anchor. He's kind of giving a little bit of his perspective into things. But I kind of see it as like a little bit more entertaining than normal news, and it also gives like a really great human perspective on stories sometimes, because as news journalists, we have to kind of talk like robots. Well, not really robots, but we have to separate ourselves, and so you lose that sense of human from the story, at least in my opinion. This is all my opinion.
Yeah. Like we said,
I think
all our opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think with these opinion shows, it humanizes the story a little bit more into a perspective that either you relate to or you don't relate to. And so I don't think it's not meant to provoke negativity or provoke a certain agenda. But I think if you can sit down and kind of separate yourself from that, you can really look at it as a very educational, informational thing in a different way.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but now that you mention it, it does make sense in that it is them just humanizing the news. Because a lot of the times it's just, I mean, sure, they probably are going off of a teleprompter too, but they're human after all. They can't remember everything. But like the fact that they're giving you their perspective on something that's happening, and that's fair. I don't think that is entirely wrong, and I don't think that, like you said, the motivation behind it initially was probably harmless. It wasn't necessarily harmful. But now it's turned into something slightly different in different places. But hopefully it changes. Fingers crossed. Hopefully it changes. Man, I like
just crossing all of mine.
Yeah. I wish I could cross my toes too, but you can't see it. But anyway, no, let's not start a foot fetish on this podcast. Anyway, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. Anyway, let's.
It is okay.
It is okay. Moving away from that really quickly. What do you see yourself doing in this field? I mean, you sort of mentioned that before, but are you looking at yourself as becoming more of a journalist going in the field, or are you looking at yourself being behind the scenes and being more of a producer, or an amalgamation of the both?
So I like to produce content. I think that is just kind of who I am as a person. Like if you go up into my web portfolio website, you'll see I like to produce content. That's pretty much my introduction. And so, I'm not the greatest person on camera. I'm not the kind of person that will be really good if you ask me to go on a camera, like speak for this thing without knowing anything for 5 minutes. Sometimes improvisation is a big thing in news, because sometimes news comes in as you go with the show. So anchors have to be really good at coming up with things on the spot. And so I can do that, but my brain works differently in the sense that I'm better with, organizing the show and working behind the scenes and appearing on camera. I have kind of produced my own content on YouTube. I have my own channel where I talk about, my experience with quarantine, that sort of thing, where I enjoy, but I only do on camera then because, I can control what I want to do. That's in my creative control, and I feel comfortable in that space. I'm not as comfortable kind of speaking to an audience. I think that's where I fail at. And what I admire a lot of anchors, when they do stuff like that. So I don't picture myself necessarily going into the news industry as an on-air camera talent person, but more of the person behind the scenes. But if they need someone to run to get a story and kind of hop on like a jacket in front of the camera real quick, I don't mind doing that. But I'm leaning more towards the creating the show behind the scenes and seeing the product come to life. That's just me.
Fair. You said something there that I was thinking about, but now it's escaped my mind. Anyway, maybe it'll come back eventually. You said, there we go. I was thinking about, it's back. I'll link those videos down below in the description for anybody who's interested in sort of seeing that. I like those videos that you put out because it gave perspective about how this sort of whole quarantine situation was.
You.
Yeah, you're welcome. was back in Malaysia and so on. So let's transition into that before we go into the latter stages of this episode. What was that whole experience like for you in terms of documenting it? Because you were also documenting it for Youth Central, if I'm not mistaken, or for something else. I can't remember. But you were documenting it for multiple
Yes,
places,
yes, I
right?
was.
Yeah. So how is that? How is that
Mhm.
like for you in terms of both documenting it and experiencing it in the flesh?
Well, at first it kind of started off as a kind of I want to do this because we don't know anything about it. Because when that so basically what happened was I was supposed to go back, and it was supposed to be a you go home and then you self quarantine at home for 14 days and then you're free to move around.
Mm,
That was what it was. But then I think maybe 3 days before I was supposed to fly back, the government in Malaysia were like, hey, we're implementing this new rule. You will need to quarantine at a government facilitated area for 14 days. You can't go home, see your family. You have to go there straight away after the airport. And so at first we were all kind of freaking out. At least I was. I had like a
mm,
full breakdown session before like my flight. And so it was kind of the fear of like, where are we going? What are we doing? What are they doing to us? Are we going to be locked up in some prison for like 14 days? Is that the case? And there were these pictures that circulated online of this huge, I think it was a warehouse in Malaysia where they put like they just propped up beds and stuff like that. And so it wasn't like the greatest place to go if you were gonna stay there for 14 days. And so this was all new. And so it was kind of like, are we going there? Are we going? Where are we going? And so I kind of documented it in a way to inform people who were also going back, because I know a lot of international students were also flying back to Malaysia
mm,
at the same time as me. So it was kind of like in my news brain, I'm like, here is more information to inform other people. But it was also a great way for me to keep off the thought of impending doom. But obviously, if you check up on those videos, I didn't go into anywhere bad. I went into
mm,
a hotel, a 4-star, I believe, in Malaysia. And it was really an interesting experience. And so it was kind of just documenting what I'm going through for people, because one thing I love about news is that everyone brings different perspectives to the table. And so it's really interesting to hear other people's stories. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do the same thing. For once, I would just tell my story for a little bit and see how it goes. And I
mm,
think it was received really well, I think.
mm,
But I just like being a storyteller. That's just who I am.
mm. Interesting. Because yeah, like I think initially, especially during that time, because we were still sort of trying to understand the magnitude of all of this. Um, I mean, I
Mm-hmm,
think we've
mm-hmm.
maybe understood the magnitude of it now. Maybe we haven't. I don't know. I guess it's an individual question for them, people to ask
Question.
themselves. But yeah,
Yeah.
um, I think those things like those videos or that update or whatever that you gave, I think it helped for sure. I think I'm sure people went up and were like, "Oh, this is how it is," This is how I should prepare myself for it. So I feel like it definitely helps people prepare themselves. And we're coming back full circle to what you said earlier at the start, that news is about sort of making people aware of things going on and giving you the truth and letting you know about the things you should do or shouldn't do, etc., etc. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of it all, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I do have slightly more negative view of national news in general, because that's what we see. Like that's what you usually see booming on Twitter or on social media. You don't necessarily see local news on those places, not because they don't
Mm-hmm.
have presence, but I think their presence is not as big as these national organizations. So
Yeah.
I am someone that stays away from the news as much as I can. But after this conversation that we've had, I feel like I'm coming away with a slightly more positive view on it. So thank you. I appreciate you saying everything that you did about the news. Um,
That's good. That's good.
yeah.
No worries.
Yeah. Uh,
Honestly,
yeah. No, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, it's kind of like a no, I'm sorry, there's a lag. We're in two different continents, so internet isn't super great.
Yeah.
So if I'm cutting you off, I apologize. But I do want to say kind of like, if people do feel that national news is way too much for them to handle, like you feel very overwhelmed, I do encourage you to kind of maybe find a local news station that most news stations nowadays have social media as well. So if you're not looking at CNN or ABC or Fox, that kind of thing, you can always look for your smaller stations. And these stations, what I really love about working in local news is that they humanize the story, they localize the story. And they take that big story and they find out what's important to you. So kind of like, for example, there's a big national story about vaccines. And so from there, the local angle is what does this mean for Oklahoma? And so a lot of times as well with local news, I know that the station that I intern at, they really like looking for these heartwarming stories to kind of pace throughout like your negative stuff. And so I think if you would have, honestly, I hope this is the same practice with most local stations. So, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the big ones, look for the local ones. You still get that important information, but you don't feel the big impending doom feeling falling down on you. And just to touch on the thing you said about, feeling a bit more positive towards things, this is like a really big, I think, philosophy of mine with my purpose in news. And I believe I told this to an interview I did with Teen Vogue a couple months back. No, last year actually. But what I said to them, and I still kind of remember it till now, it was if I can just help someone feel a little bit less stressed or feel a little bit better about their day with information I'm giving them, that's pretty much my job done. Because like I said, my role, at least my purpose, my own personal purpose and passion with news, is to make sure that the people around me, people I love, they feel some sort of relief in this impending doom, because every day feels like impending doom nowadays. And so that's just what I really, really push on. And I hope that more people kind of follow this philosophy as well.
No, yeah, and I'll try and link those in the description section below too, so that people can check it out. But no, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm gonna flip back and start watching the news tomorrow, but it'll probably get me to sort of keep an eye out for what's happening on local news, just to sort of keep myself aware. Because like I said, we spoke about this a little on the recent episode that went out last week, at the time of recording, that is. And yeah, so I think there is a bit of an arc there, I guess. Oh well. Anyway, we're gonna transition into the last section of the podcast, into the segment called Bish Bash Bosh, where I give the guests 5 words that are sort of the principles behind me starting this podcast and the Instagram page. And
I have heard about this.
Yeah. So basically, the guest has to respond to these words in 3 answers, or 3 words or 3 phrases, whatever that might be. That's how they have to respond to these. So, for example, if I was to say media, what are the 3 words that come to your mind when I say the word media? That sort of thing. Media is not the first word, but does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Cool. There was a bit of a lag there, and I apologize. But yeah, the first one.
Also, I think you froze up on my computer, so if you hear me quite delayed, I think that's why.
Okay.
But yeah, it does make sense.
Cool.
So don't worry about it.
Cool. Okay. The first word is differences. What comes to your mind? Like the first things that come to your mind when I say the word differences?
Differences. Certainly race is up there for me. So race would be the first one. Opinions, I would say. And then height. I don't know.
Sure, yeah, why not? It could be height too. Hey, nothing wrong with that. We all have different heights. We're not all the same. We're not all 5'8" or 6 foot. And that's what makes us unique.
Can you imagine? We would all be Oompa Loompas if we were all the same height.
Right.
It'd be hilarious.
Yeah, that'd be weird. That'd be very weird. I can't imagine. I should probably stop imagining that. Anyway, the second word is what is the second word? Oh no. I've gone blank. I've really gone blank. Oh no. Nuance. There we go. It's back. Oh geez.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Nuance.
Nuance, yes.
Nuance. This is like, one of those like exams where they're like, use this word in a sentence, and I'm just like blanking out. I'm like,
It's okay. Now it's your turn to
well, I'm gonna give you 3 words that aren't. Well, I'm gonna try to give you 3 words that aren't I don't know. But I'm gonna say small. Nuances, small.
Okay.
And I guess details. I don't really have another word besides that. Can I say 2?
Yeah, that's fine. That's okay. Yeah, details. I think details fits in pretty well with nuance. So cool. That works for me. The third word is learning. What comes to your mind when I say the word learning?
Learning. Um, Environment for some reason comes up.
Mm.
Uh, Differences, it comes up again, I think,
Okay.
in this situation for me. Learning and then experiences.
Mm. I like it. The fourth word is empathy. What comes to your mind when I say the word empathy?
Oh, empathy. People
Mm-hmm.
comes up. Uh, Skill comes up, although
Okay.
it's not really a skill to be empathetic, I think.
Mm.
And human.
Mm. Nice. The
Kind of
last
in the
word.
sense of like, you are a human, yeah,
Yeah, no, go
sorry,
ahead. Go ahead, please. I didn't mean to
my
interrupt you.
bad.
Go
Lag
ahead.
is,
Yeah.
no, it's okay. It's more of human in the sense of like, you are being human, not as in a human, as in a person. That was just what I
Mm.
was going to explain with that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, the last word is similarities. What comes to your mind when I say the word similarities?
Twins.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, they're similar.
So I think they're the same in some ways.
Yeah.
Okay, similarities. Friends, I think,
Okay.
comes up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And similarities. For some reason, easy comes up as well. I
Okay.
think there are some connotations that I have to go into my brain to find, but easy is something that pops up to me as well.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll take that. I'll take that. Yeah, because there's a lot of underlying meaning to these words, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's very deep internally. But I like the way that you used similarities as easy, because maybe there is a certain ease associated with talking to people similar to you in some sense, which is why you said friends, I guess. And maybe there's a similar goal there, like, achieving a goal together. I don't know. I'm just drawing out stories from what you just said. I should stop. But yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that caps us off pretty well for this segment. So cool. Thank you for your responses, Amanda.
No
Uh,
worries.
yeah, we're going to transition into the last two questions. Well, the last one isn't really a question, but we're going to transition into those two for now. The first one is, how do you relate to people that have a difference in opinion compared to you, for example?
Ooh, that's a good question because I haven't actually thought of that.
Yeah.
Well, in a sense, I don't think you can really relate to that person, if you have very jarring different opinions. But for me, it's always coming back to we are both Whoop, my pen just touched my mic. Um,
It's all good.
I think it all comes back to, we're both human, both of us will share differences. And that's what makes us unique. If, I were to be like a copy paste version of myself, I would probably, push that person into traffic, like, nah, bye-bye, because, we are all different and we're all unique and we all bring so many different stories and experiences to the table. And that's what makes the world go around, I think, if we all were to be, like I said, the same, we will all be Oompa Loompas working in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, so
Yeah.
that's a weird visual. But yeah, and so just remembering that people are human and people go through different experiences, and that's why they pull different opinions on things is just what helps me relate to them. And also just, coming back to, differences makes us all better. We, bounce off ideas of each other. You can always find something better because of our differences, so yeah, that's kind
Mm.
of what I do. And also, I guess in terms of work, if I were to come in with someone who is a reporter, but they're leaning towards a certain political angle, I kind of take off my friend hat and I'm putting on the producer hat, and I'm like, hey, I love you, you're a great worker and all that, but we can't have you pushing out these kind of things and in the show. And so this is all just for work. It's not because I hate you or because I
Yeah.
want to squash your opinions. It's because of professionalism. So kind of like personal versus professional opinions, and also just remembering everyone is human and we all go through different things.
Mm. Mm. Cool. Yeah, I like it, especially with perspective in terms of news and things like that. Because, like I said, like we spoke about this enough already, but that national sort of umbrella has made you think differently about the news, which is why I think it goes back to that sort of negativity that we have towards it, and the negativity we have towards people who follow one over the other. But yeah, and in that sense, it makes it very hard for us to relate to people. But yeah, there's all of these things that you just said, which can help, even if there's a difference in opinion. So yeah, that's just the way that we have to figure things out, because just
Yeah.
boxing ourselves into a particular group and being like, oh, I hate you for not being in my group, screw you, kind of thing. I mean, it's not going to get us anywhere.
But
So
the thing is, these differences, you can learn a lot from it. Like, for example, I used to, I spent 18 years of my life in Malaysia, and that was it. So all I knew was, my family, my friends, and, just everything I had in this little bubble.
and
But,
boba.
And boba, yes, boba was important as well. But then, after I went to the US, you get to learn so much more. And, obviously the US and Malaysia were very different, where we are, what we stand for in culture was so different. And so, because I made that choice to go into a different location, I learned so much more about the world around me and the people I interact with, and about myself as well. And so I think when it comes to approaching this differences, you really need to keep an open mind to a new learning experience. And that's just how you can go through things and learn things and become better and progress as a human being and progress as a society. And I'm getting off tangent.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I like it. I like it. I don't mind tangents at all. I think that just makes the conversation even better. Like, I personally think, because it adds more context to what you're saying. So it helps to have context, especially in a world where we see stuff on social media with no context and we end up making decisions.
Misinformation.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
Oh, I can go into a whole hour about that.
Exactly. So you giving context is totally cool with me. Damn, maybe I'm being a little greedy here, but I'm going to ask you another question before we transition into the last
No,
one.
that's okay. I have time. It is. It is. I have nothing to do, so it's fine.
Okay. I was going to ask, like, do you find it challenging to keep an open mind sometimes, in terms of approaching people when you're working in the field of news?
Yeah. Surprisingly, I do, because, especially if it comes to things that I'm very passionate about, like my culture, like if people were to say a certain thing about maybe my race, or they say, it's not meant to do harm, but sometimes I can just really like, oh my God, you're so ignorant. So I think back then, before I really got into news, I used to react quite badly. I won't react in person. I'm more of that. I will talk bad about you in my head and I will tell on you to my therapist, and she'll hate you too. That was kind of me, hate from behind. But as I've kind of, worked with more people with Youth Central News, I've met people at UCO, and, all these different opinions and everything, you kind of have to tell yourself like, hey, it's hard to be open-minded. It's hard to kind of let yourself be vulnerable to other people's opinions that can hurt you. And, sometimes that does happen. But at the end of the day, I think I tend to tell myself that people aren't going to intentionally hurt you. Most of the time, there are good people in the world, and sometimes they just want to ask questions and get to know you better, or they just don't have the same perspective as you, so they can't relate in that sense. Like for example, like with Youth Central and all that, there aren't a lot of international students who work on the show. Like I believe with Malaysians that are in the program at a senior level, it's me and then Mars, who was on the previous episode. So some people, they don't realize like oh, we need to think about the international student perspective, or we need to think about the Asian perspective, because they only know what they know. And so sometimes it's not them being ignorant towards you, it's not them being dismissive of your culture or whatever, it's just because they don't know. And so for me, it always comes back to, let's educate them, because they don't know the same thing that I do, and I don't know the same thing they do. So always just coming back to having open conversations and discussions with people that will have differences with you. And obviously, if it runs to a situation where it gets very negative and it's starting to fight, you're starting to fight with that person, I think just making sure that you sit down and communicate face to face with that person when possible to iron out your differences is a good way to go. But yeah, just biggest takeaway, just think back, educating yourself and educate those around you.
Cool. Okay, for the last request, I guess it's not a question, but a request. Leave the listeners with a positive thought or something that you've learned in your 21 years of life, right? 21?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's a bit cliche, but it's kind of like things will get better eventually. That's something that I've really taken away, especially with last year. I think a year ago today, I'm going to go a bit dark on this,
That's fine.
but I basically went through a really series of traumatic events within a week. The people who knew me in Oklahoma would know what happened, but I'm not going to go into detail about that. But what happened was that drove me into a really dark place where I pretty much just went through a really huge depressive episode, and I just wasn't feeling I didn't want to be alive. That's going to be a very jarring statement to put out there, but I remember there was literally a day where I wanted to go and not be around anymore. It's the way I'll put it. And but then my legs decided to, instead of walking to where I wanted to go, I walked to a friend's house and I stayed there overnight. And so it was because of my brain was like, you know what, maybe life's a bit more worth living than you think. Because of that, that's the reason why I'm still here. Because honestly, if I think back to last week, it was kind of like, not last week, last year, I was in a position where I didn't see myself living to see 2021. And I didn't even see myself living through seeing my birthday in person. And so, like, people who know what happened would know how bad it was, but it will get better eventually. I didn't think that I was going to find a way out of that, sinkhole that I was in. I didn't think that, there was going to be a day when I would wake up and I was like, I'm so happy to be here. Because every single day for like a few months, it was like, I kind of wish I would just die in my sleep, But day by day, it gets better. And whatever you're going through, it makes you stronger. It makes you learn. And you learn more from those experiences, as shitty as they are. And one day you will wake up and you're like, hey, life is worth living. I feel okay. And, it will get better. And sometimes I think it's also really important to tell yourself that, hey, it is okay to feel these negative emotions. It is okay to break down sometimes. It is okay to want to scream or throw things at the wall. It is okay because we are all human and that's just how we are. We react. And reacting negatively is not the worst thing in the world. And that's something that I had to come to terms with. In Asian culture, we don't really, we kind of have this stigma around mental health and feeling, especially if you're a guy, you're kind of taught to suck it up and move forward, even though you feel like you want to, burst into flames. So in my experience so far in the 21 years I've been living, I guess it's kind of, everything will be okay eventually. It's very cliche, but it will eventually. And it's okay to feel the way that you do. If you want to have a day where you just cry on your bed and not do anything for a day, that's fine. But what's important is that you come back after that and you continue pushing forward and you keep moving forward. And that is what matters a lot.
I was just saying that I think I'm glad you didn't take the step that you took. And like a lot has happened since that has like helped you learn a lot about be it, journalism or so on and so forth, about life in general. So yeah, more power to you for like being able to get through that, because it can suck you in, like it can suck people in. And yeah, more power to you for being able to sort of get through that. And yeah, on that note, thank you so much for everybody who's been listening and watching. And thank you, Amanda, for coming on and on a 14-hour time difference and willing to have this conversation at 4 o'clock in the morning. And yeah,
it's okay. Hey, I have this thing where my brain works best when I'm not asleep, and the best thoughts come out, when you're, it's midnight and you're not doing anything yet. So, it is a great way to facilitate conversation. And again, thank you for having me despite all the internet troubles that we've been having
it's okay.
today.
Yeah, we had a bit of an issue. I don't know if this is gonna, we'll see how it works out. But anyway, if you're seeing this entire thing, you've probably seen the whole podcast unedited. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining and listening. And until next time, take care.
Thank you for watching this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek. Make sure to follow Amanda on her social media accounts and mention in the comment section below some of the things that you were interested about from this conversation. Make sure to also check the description box for other sources of information and content that we've spoken about today. like this video, share it around, and subscribe to the channel and follow Random Relatability on all social media platforms. Once again, if you've listened to this conversation in its entirety, I appreciate you for doing so. Thank you so very much for joining in on the conversation. Until next time, stay safe, take care, and don't forget to keep your mind open to different perspectives, because you never know, random relatability might just be around the corner.